Henry adjusted his baseball cap, pulling it low over his face as he stepped into the bustling dining room of his restaurant, the Golden Plate. The air was thick with the aroma of sizzling steaks and freshly baked bread, but something felt off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The reviews were decent, and the profits were steady. Yet Henry, 45 years old and the CEO of the chain, had a nagging feeling that he was losing touch with the soul of his business. He wasn't one to sit in a corner office all day staring at spreadsheets. 10 years ago, Henry had opened his first restaurant with nothing but a borrowed grill and a dream. He had worked every position, from dishwasher to head chef, before expanding to 5 locations across the state. Lately, complaints about one particular location have started piling up. Slow service, rude staff, and even whispers about poor food quality. Henry decided it was time to go undercover. Dressed in a simple uniform and armed with a fake name tag reading Harry, Henry walked into the restaurant like any other new hire. The manager barely glanced at him. "You're Harry, right?" said Mark, a man in his mid-30s with slick-back hair and an ill-fitting polo shirt. "We're short-staffed today, so I'm throwing you straight into prep. Shadow Mia, she'll show you the ropes." Mia was already slicing vegetables at lightning speed when Henry approached her. She looked no older than 23, her ponytail tucked under her cap as beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. "Hey," Henry said casually, "I'm Harry. Need any help?" She barely looked up. "Sure," she muttered, handing her a cutting board without breaking her rhythm. Her movements were precise but mechanical, and her eyes carried an exhaustion that no amount of coffee could hide. As the lunch rush began, Henry quickly realized why Mia looked so drained. She wasn't just prepping ingredients, she was running orders to tables, cleaning spills, and managing customer complaints. All while Mark barked orders from the back office. At one point, Mia stumbled slightly while carrying a tray of drinks. "Hey," Henry whispered when she returned to the prep station. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Just didn't get much sleep last night." Henry frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he watched as Mark strolled out of the office, holding his phone and chuckling with another employee. "You should have seen Mia earlier," Mark said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She looked like she needed training wheels." Henry's jaw clenched as he saw Mia freeze for a moment before returning to work without saying a word. The following day, Henry arrived at the restaurant early, pulling his baseball cap low over his face. The kitchen was already alive with the clatter of pans and the hum of conversation. He slipped into the back unnoticed, blending in as Harry, the new hire. Today, he was determined to dig deeper into what he had seen yesterday. The exhaustion on Mia's face, the chaos in the kitchen, and Mark's dismissive attitude. As Henry tied his apron and stepped into the prep area, he noticed Mia already at work. Her ponytail was tucked neatly under her cap, but her movements were slower today, less precise. She looked up briefly when she saw him and gave a tired smile between tasks, let alone take breaks. During closing time that evening, Mia looked like she could barely stand as she clocked out and grabbed her bag. Henry caught up with her near the back door. "Let me walk you to your car," he offered. "I take the bus," Mia replied quietly. "Then I'll wait with you at the stop." Mia hesitated but eventually nodded. They walked in silence to the bus stop down the street. The night air was cool but heavy with unspoken words. "Why do you stay?" Henry asked finally as they sat on the bench. Mia stared at her hands for a long moment before answering. "My mom's sick," she said softly. "I'm paying for her medication and trying to save up for school." Henry felt a pang of guilt twist in his chest. Here was someone giving everything she had to keep going while being treated like she was disposable. "You deserve better than this," he said quietly. Mia shrugged but didn't respond. When her bus arrived, Henry watched as she climbed aboard and disappeared into the night. He stood there for a moment longer before heading back to his car. That night, Henry sat in his home office reviewing everything he had observed over the past 2 days. Mark's toxic leadership style, Mia's exhaustion, the disorganized kitchen, and most importantly, how all of it reflected on him as a leader. He had built this restaurant chain from scratch with a vision of excellence, not just in food, but in how people were treated. Somewhere along the way, that vision had been lost at this location. Henry knew what he had to do next: confront Mark directly and make sweeping changes to restore morale and improve operations. Tomorrow would be different for everyone involved. The morning sun spilled through the windows of the Golden Plate, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Henry stood outside, dressed sharply in his tailored suit, the disguise of Harry now abandoned. Today wasn't about blending in, it was about stepping up. His undercover journey had revealed cracks in his restaurant's foundation, and he was here to confront them head-on. Inside, the staff bustled about, preparing for the lunch rush. Mia was already at her station, slicing vegetables with her usual precision, but her movements were slower than before. Henry noticed the weariness in her eyes, the weight she carried silently. Mark, the manager, was pacing near the register, his phone glued to his hand as he barked orders to a junior employee who looked visibly overwhelmed. Henry took a deep breath and pushed open the glass door. The cool air inside hit him immediately, but it did little to calm the storm brewing in his chest. As he stepped into the restaurant, heads turned. Employees exchanged confused glances, whispering to one another. Mark froze mid-sentence when he saw Henry approaching. Mr. Blake? Mark stammered, his smile forced and nervous. I didn't know you were visiting today. Henry didn't reply immediately. Instead, he turned to the staff and raised his voice just enough to command attention. Can everyone gather near the prep station? I have something important to say. Mia looked up from her cutting board, her eyes widening in surprise. The rest of the team hesitated, but eventually shuffled toward him, forming a loose circle around the prep area. Mark cleared his throat nervously. Is this about, something specific? Because I can assure you— Stop talking, Henry interrupted calmly but firmly. The room fell silent. Henry scanned the faces of his employees, taking a moment to let the weight of his words settle before speaking. I've spent the last 2 days working alongside all of you. He began, his tone steady but laced with emotion. You didn't know who I was because I didn't want you to. I needed to see this place through your eyes, to understand what's really happening here. The staff exchanged uneasy glances while Mark shifted uncomfortably. What I saw, Henry continued, was both inspiring and deeply troubling. He turned to Mia directly. Mia, he said softly, you are one of the hardest working people I've ever met. You show up every day, give everything you have, and keep this place running despite being treated like you're invisible. Mia blinked rapidly, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her apron. You deserve better, Henry said firmly, and starting today, you're going to get it. Henry's gaze shifted to Mark, and his tone hardened. Mark, he said sharply, I heard everything. The way you mocked Mia behind her back, the way you dismissed your team's efforts while spending most of your time on your phone. Mark opened his mouth to protest, but Henry cut him off. I don't need excuses, Henry said coldly. I need accountability. You've created a toxic environment where good people are overworked and undervalued. Mark's face turned red as he stammered. But Mr. Blake, I've been managing this restaurant according to company policy. Company policy doesn't include disrespecting your staff or ignoring basic food safety standards, Henry snapped. Hand over your keys. Mark froze for a moment before reluctantly pulling his lanyard from around his neck and placing it on the counter. You're done here, Henry said. Turning back to the staff, Henry softened his tone. I take full responsibility for letting things get this bad, he admitted. I should have been paying closer attention instead of relying on reports that didn't tell me the whole story. He paused before continuing. Starting today, things are going to change. Henry outlined several immediate changes. Improved working conditions, new equipment would be installed within a week, including fans in the prep area and additional seating for breaks. Fair scheduling. No more back-to-back shifts or last-minute schedule changes without approval. Employee recognition. A new program would be implemented to reward hard work and dedication. Finally, he turned back to Mia. You've earned more than just my gratitude, he said warmly. I'm offering you a promotion to assistant manager, with full training and corporate support. Mia's eyes widened in shock. Me? She whispered. Yes, Henry replied with a smile. If you're willing. Mia nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes as she whispered, Thank you. Henry spent the rest of the day walking through every corner of the restaurant with the staff, listening to their concerns, asking questions about their experiences, and taking notes without judgment. By evening, there was a noticeable shift in energy throughout the restaurant. The staff moved with purpose rather than hesitation, Conversations felt lighter. Smiles began to appear where there had been none before. As Henry prepared to leave, Mia approached him near the door. "Mr. Blake," she said quietly, "thank you for everything." Henry smiled warmly at her. "This is just the beginning," he said firmly. "We're going to make this place better. For all of us." Over the next few weeks, corporate sent a new general manager to oversee operations temporarily while Mia completed her training. Staff morale improved significantly as employees felt heard and valued for the first time. Customer satisfaction ratings began climbing steadily as service quality improved. Henry visited other locations in his restaurant chain, using what he had learned during his undercover experience as a blueprint for change. One evening, as Henry sat in his home office reviewing reports from across his restaurants, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride, not just in what he had built, but in how he was rebuilding it. He knew there was still work to be done, that leadership wasn't about fixing everything overnight, but about showing up consistently and listening when it mattered most. Henry leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. This wasn't just about running a successful business anymore. It was about creating a culture where everyone felt seen and valued. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the golden plate, casting a warm glow on the polished floors. It had been 3 months since Henry's undercover journey had exposed the cracks in his restaurant's foundation. The chaos, the mismanagement, and the toxic environment he had uncovered were no longer just memories. They were lessons that had reshaped both him and his business. Henry stood near the entrance, watching as customers filed in for breakfast. The energy in the restaurant was different now. There was a sense of purpose, a rhythm that hadn't existed before. Employees moved with confidence, and their interactions with customers were genuine and warm. The smiles weren't forced, they were real. Mia, now dressed in a crisp white shirt with her new assistant manager's name tag pinned neatly on her chest, stood behind the counter, organizing orders. She looked up and caught Henry's eye, offering him a small smile. He nodded back, a quiet acknowledgement of how far she had come. "Mia," Henry called as he approached the counter. "How's everything running this morning?" "Smooth," she replied confidently. "We've got a full staff today and the prep work was finished ahead of schedule." Henry smiled. "Good to hear." Mia hesitated for a moment before adding, "Thank you again for everything. I didn't think I'd ever get to this point." "You earned it," Henry said firmly. "I just gave you the opportunity you deserved." The changes Henry had implemented after firing Mark and restructuring the restaurant weren't limited to just this location. Across all 5 branches of the Golden Plate, employees were experiencing a shift in culture. Employee feedback channels. Henry had introduced anonymous feedback forms and monthly one-on-one meetings with corporate representatives to ensure every employee felt heard. Improved working conditions. New equipment had been installed in all kitchens, including better ventilation systems and ergonomic prep stations. Recognition programs. Employees who went above and beyond were now publicly acknowledged during weekly meetings, fostering a sense of pride and camaraderie. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of an employee advisory board, where representatives from each location met quarterly with Henry and his leadership team to discuss challenges and propose solutions. Not everyone embraced the changes immediately. Some longtime managers resisted the new policies, arguing that they disrupted established routines. During one such meeting at corporate headquarters, Henry faced pushback from a regional manager named Greg. "With all due respect," Greg began, his tone clipped, "these changes are costing us time and money. Do we really need to spend resources on things like employee wellness programs? This is a business, not a charity." Henry leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Greg," he said calmly, "let me ask you something. How much does it cost us when employees quit because they're burned out? How much do we lose when customers stop coming back because they can feel that our staff doesn't want to be here?" Greg opened his mouth to respond but closed it again. "This isn't just about being kind," Henry continued. "It's about building something sustainable, something we can all be proud of. If you're not on board with that vision, then maybe this isn't the right place for you." The room fell silent. Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat but didn't argue further. Back at the Golden Plate, Amy for giving my daughter this opportunity and for believing in her when so many others didn't. Henry smiled softly. She's earned every bit of it. Mrs. Carter hesitated before adding, You've changed her life, and mine too. As she left, Henry stood there for a moment, letting her words sink in. It wasn't often that he allowed himself to reflect on his impact, but tonight, he did. Later that evening, Henry sat in his home office reviewing reports from across his restaurants. The numbers told a story of improvement, higher employee retention rates, increased customer satisfaction scores, and even a modest boost in revenue. But what mattered more than the numbers were the stories. The moments like Mia mentoring Emily or Mrs. Carter expressing her gratitude. Henry leaned back in his chair and stared out the window at the city lights beyond. This wasn't just about running a successful business anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, a legacy built on respect, empathy, and integrity. He picked up his phone and drafted an email to his leadership team. Dear team, we've made incredible progress over these past few months, but our work is far from being done. Let's keep listening. Let's keep improving. Let's keep building something we can all be proud of. Henry. As he hit send, Henry felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This was only the beginning. Months later, the Golden Plate became known not just for its food, but for its exceptional service and positive work culture. Mia completed her management training program and was promoted to general manager of another location. Employees across all branches reported feeling more valued and motivated than ever before. Customers noticed and appreciated the difference. Henry continued visiting his restaurants regularly, not as an undercover boss, but as a leader who cared deeply about his people and their experiences. And every time he walked into one of his restaurants and saw smiles, both from employees and customers, he knew he had made the right choice. Because at the end of the day, success wasn't just about profits or accolades, it was about people. And that was a legacy worth fighting for.